Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole. I'm the Diversion 2.0 project coordinator at Georgian Bay Forever. Thank you so much for joining us today for our third and final webinar in the Tackling Plastic Pollution webinar series. We hope that you have enjoyed and learned from the webinars thus far, and we are pleased to bring you the Plastic Waters webinar today. You'll notice that your cameras and audios have been turned off for this webinar. Please feel free to use the chat feature to share information, as well as the Q&A feature to ask questions. There will be a brief Q&A period at the end of this webinar. So I'll start off the webinar today by introducing our lovely speakers, who are GBF's Plastic Pollution Program Assistants. These staff are university students at different stages in their degrees from schools all across Canada. We are lucky to have them as they each bring unique skills and perspectives to GBF this summer. First, we have Carrie. She's a third-year biology student out of Queen's University, focusing on animal physiology and ecological systems. Next is Emma, a third year at Dalhousie University studying environmental sustainability and international development with a minor in geography. Sophie is a second year biology student at the University of Victoria. And last but not least, Bronwyn is an environmental sustainability and environmental technology student with a specialization in ecosystem management at Lakehead University. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Georgian Bay Forever, I'll just tell you a little bit about us. So we are a charity dedicated to scientific research and public education on Georgian Bay's aquatic ecosystem. Our mission is to protect, enhance, and restore the aquatic ecosystems of Georgian Bay by funding accredited research on water levels, water quality, and ecosystems, by educating the public and government on issues regarding the environmental protection, conservation, safety, and preservation of the water and natural features of Georgian Bay, and by enhancing the public's appreciation for the environment. And with that, I will turn it over to Bronwyn to get us started.
Hello, and thank you again for being here as a part of our third and final installment of the Tackling Plastic Pollution webinar series. We started this off with our first webinar, Wearing Plastic, where we focused on the impacts of textiles and clothing on the environment. Our second webinar is Recycling Plastic Working, where we explored recycling in Ontario and Canada and the recycling processes. Now we'll go into Plastic Waters, which is looking at the effects of plastic in the environment. If you've been with us for all three webinars, thank you so much. If you haven't, or you want to rewatch the webinars, all of them are available and will be available on YouTube at Georgian Bay Forever. So I'm just going to go into what we're going to discuss today. We'll start us off with overconsumption and single-use plastics. We'll then explore plastics on land and then plastics in the water. We'll talk about ocean gyres and plastic pollution specifically in the Great Lakes and Georgian Bay. We'll then talk about the environmental impacts of plastic. We'll discuss water quality degradation, ecosystem and wildlife health, as well as bioaccumulation, biomagnification, and the effects on human health. We'll finish off by discussing Diversion 2.0 and Divert and Capture, which are Georgian Bay Forever's project to help combat plastic pollution in and surrounding Georgian Bay. I wanted to start us off with something a little bit different than plastic pollution, but still super important in regards to global well-being and environment health. And it is the most recent report released by the IPCC on climate change, released on August 7th this year. The IPCC stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They're a United Nations group established in 1988 by a group of climate scientists. This report provides a high-level summary about the current understanding of climate and climate change. It includes the role of human influence on climate change, potential future climate scenarios, as well as how we can reduce climate change. Some of the key findings in the most recent report released are that climate change is undoubtedly being caused by human activity, and the Earth is already experiencing a warming of 1.09 degrees. This will continue to rise if we don't take action. Our best possible scenario is that the climate will stabilize warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Every region on the globe is and will be affected by climate change. We can see it already with increasing extreme weather events. If we want to look close to home, Ontario officials are saying that the number of northern wildfires is more than double the 10-year average. In 2021 so far, we've had over 1,150 fires. The 10-year average is 735 fires. Fires are also burning more than 3 times more than they did historically. The future of the climate depends heavily on the actions that we take now, and we need to take action now. So obviously, human influence plays a major role in climate change. Our overconsumption and convenience cultures are taking a toll on the planet. Canadians alone are generating approximately 31 million tons of garbage per year. That's 2.7 kilograms of garbage per person per day. That's the equivalent weight of approximately 3 basketballs. We are consuming resources faster than the earth is able to replenish them. And if everyone lived as the average Canadian did, we would need to have 5 earths. Our single-use lifestyle has led to a large plastic pollution problem. Canadians are using almost 15 billion plastic bags every year, and we're using close to 57 million plastic straws every day. We're overfilling landfills, and we're creating litter that's harming entire ecosystems. So plastic doesn't biodegrade into the environment, it just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. And with all this plastic being constantly used and discarded, it's not a surprise that microplastics are being found globally and even in remote regions, such as in the Arctic and ice cores, and in the Marianas Trench, the deepest part of the ocean. The most common microplastics are fragments, which is a piece of plastic that's broken off of something bigger, microfibers, which are the most common form of microplastic, which come from synthetic fibers such as polyester, polystyrene foam, which comes from stuff like takeout containers and unencapsulated dock foam, as well as nurdles, which are pellets released in manufacturing, as well as microbeads, which are present in personal care products. So how is plastic breaking down in the environment? It can be one or a variety of many different ways. Sunlight, oxidation, and friction are the main ways that plastic is able to break down. The UV in sunlight creates a chemical reaction in the plastic, causing it to degrade into smaller pieces. This is similar to the way that we get a sunburn when we go out in the sun and are exposed to UV. Over a long period of time, chemicals in plastic can react with oxygen in the air and the water to cause the further breakdown of plastic. And friction, plastic littered in the environment, is pushed around by wind, waves, it rubs up against animals, which slowly degrades the plastic each time it is experiencing friction. Microplastics are classified as less than 5 millimeters. However, that is an upper limit of microplastics. Some scientists are suggesting that a new category for plastic only visible under the microscope should be introduced called nanoplastics. Nanoplastics are not visible to the human eye, and like microplastics, they're found absolutely everywhere. It's been suggested that nanoplastic dimensions should be between 0.001 microns and 0.1 microns. Microns are 1 millionth of a meter, so super, super small. Particles of this size are able to migrate between cell membranes. For scale, I've added this diagram. You can see how small that nanoplastic is, even compared to a red blood cell, which is just 7 microns. The impacts of plastic concentrations in water and in animals has not been fully researched, and it is not fully understood. As we discussed more in depth in our previous webinar, the majority of all waste is going to landfills. In Canada, approximately 97% of the waste requiring final disposal is sent to landfill. 3% is incinerated. In 2015, 5% of Ontario's total greenhouse gas emissions came from organic waste inappropriately disposed of in landfills. Final waste treatment at landfills, if not properly managed and maintained, can cause extremely harmful effects in the environment and release pollutants into the soil, the air, and the water. Landfills are reaching capacity in Simcoe County and the surrounding areas. Municipalities need to increase their waste management and diversion tactics if we're going to efficiently tackle this problem. One of the major issues with landfills is leachate, which is this chemical soup that's created by water passing through degrading plastic in a landfill. It releases pollutants such as carbon, nitrogen, chlorine, pesticides, solvents, and other heavy metals into the groundwater and into the soil. Contaminated groundwater poses major threats to safe drinking water for humans and wildlife, as well as long-term health effects. Landfills have some prevention techniques for containing leachate, such as being strategically placed in areas where soil will be less contaminated, as well as installing prevention techniques such as landfill liners. These are placed underneath to be able to contain leachate underneath the landfill, so it's not going into the soil. However, older landfills do not have this barrier installed, and leachate is still entering the soil. For all the leftover plastic that isn't recycled or isn't contained in a landfill, it ends up as litter in the environment. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, there are 7 primary sources contributing to land litter. These are uncovered trucks, motorists, pedestrians, construction and demolition sites, home trash cans, business trash cans, loading docks, and other urban runoff. 1% of Canada's plastic is littered every year. That's the equivalent of 29,000 tons. And Canada isn't the only country that's struggling with a litter problem. Results on a study on behalf of Keep Britain Tidy showed that 42% of 18 to 21-year-olds admitted to leaving litter behind on a beach. The US is having a similar problem. Last year, United States taxpayers spent $11 billion cleaning up litter across the states. This is 10 times more the cost of their trash disposal. In Toronto, they spend over $27 million a year on collecting litter. Littering forces governments and municipalities to put really important resources towards just picking up someone else's trash. These resources could be used much more effectively in installing other pollution reduction techniques as an alternative. Although GBF is focused essentially on waterways, it's important to address the issue with terrestrial plastic. Most of global plastic comes from terrestrial sources. Estimates suggest that terrestrial microplastic pollution is up to 23 times higher than marine microplastic pollution. Microplastics are impacting soil ecosystems, crops, and livestock directly and through toxic substances associated with plastic. Microplastics in the soil disrupt bulk density, which is the dry, intact mass of soil, the ability of soil to hold water, water-stable aggregates, which is how well soil will hold together when it's wet, as well as microbial relationships and activity within the soil. All of these qualities are an integral part of soil health, and without them, plants would really struggle to grow. All of these effects are going to increase erosion, and we'll have to increase the use of fertilizers and pesticides in the land. Sewage sludge is a major source of microplastics in the soil. Microplastics enter wastewater through personal care products, the laundry, and other urban runoff such as tires and paint. During wastewater treatment, over 90% of microplastics are retained in sewage sludge. In Europe and North America, 50% of this sludge is then processed for use as agricultural fertilizer. Regulations do prohibit the use of sludge as fertilizer if it contains the presence of harmful substances such as heavy metals and some organics. However, no European or US regulations have anything against microplastic concentrations. It's estimated that upwards of 700,000 microplastics enter the soil per year, compared to more than 200,000 that are entering the oceans each year. Microplastics and other pollutants are rapidly decreasing soil quality worldwide. Synthetic fibers have been detected in fields even after 15 years after the initial application. More than 30% of global soils are severely degraded worldwide. Microplastics can act as vectors for harmful chemicals to attach to in the soil and then enter the plant. Microplastics are accumulating in plant cells, preventing the absorption of essential nutrients. This is making it harder for the plant to grow. It's reducing their height, their weight, their ability to grow roots, their germination dates, and their ability to flower. Root vegetables are more likely to have increased microplastic concentrations because they're obviously in the soil. However, microplastic particles can be transported to the edible above ground plant parts. A study released in the Journal of Environmental Research claimed that fruits and veggies, specifically carrots and apples, were the highest contaminated samples with microplastics. Plastic also interacts with land animals. It interacts with vertebrates and invertebrates alike. Many hungry animals mistake plastic debris for food and consume it. Land animals such as camels have been found to have clumps of plastic in their insides ranging from 6 to 64 kilograms. Studies on earthworms also suggest that earthworms try to avoid plastic contaminated soils. However, when it's unavoidable, it results in their reduced weight, reduced fertility, and increased mortality rates. We're going to go more in depth about the effects of animals consuming plastics in just a few slides.
While plastic on land continues to accumulate, an overwhelming amount of this plastic is released into our oceans every year. Plastic most commonly enters our oceans by environmental factors such as rain and wind, which can push littered plastic right into waterways, and through rivers, storm drains, and streams, which take plastic on a direct pathway to open water. Plastic fishing gear is also a large source of plastic pollution in oceans, as unmonitored fishing boats conveniently dump old gear straight into the ocean. It is estimated by National Geographic that by 2040, the amount of plastic waste in the ocean will triple. This graph from The Guardian outlines what type of waste dominates ocean litter by showing the percentage that each item makes up of the total litter. As shown, plastic bags dominate ocean litter as they made up 14% of all trash tallied. Plastic bags were followed closely behind by plastic bottles and food containers. All of these items being single-use plastics, meaning by preventing the manufacturing and use of single-use plastics, we can greatly reduce the amount of waste entering our oceans. The main way plastics are able to reach the ocean from continental cities is through major waterways. Waste accumulates in rivers, and those rivers carry out to larger bodies of water. It has been calculated that 10 specific rivers located in Asia and a few in Africa, labeled on the diagram to the bottom left, account for 93% of plastic carried into our oceans every year. You may be wondering why the most waste entering the oceans is coming from mostly countries in Southern Asia. The reason being, while these countries produce their own waste, they also import other countries' waste for a profit. This results in the mass sorting of countries such as Canada's waste materials, and when they are unable to be cost-effectively repurposed, they must be disposed of. With such large amounts of waste, much of it ends up mismanaged and is dumped into waterways. Beginning in 2018, in January, China took control of their waste intake by officially prohibiting the import of 24 categories of recyclable materials, including 8 types of plastic. As a result of China's policy shift, much of the world's waste has been shifted to other nations in Southeast Asia, which have less environmental regulations. From January to July in 2018, Canadian export data shows that Malaysia's imports of Canada's plastic waste almost doubled compared to the same period in 2017. And Thailand's imports of Canada's waste tripled over the same period. This means that while China stopped accepting as much waste, the plastic burden was simply shifted to nearby countries. The plastic entering the ocean from rivers often gets collected into ocean gyres. Ocean gyres are large circular ocean currents formed by global wind patterns and forces created by the Earth's rotation. The world's 5 major ocean gyres, as labeled on the diagram, are the North Atlantic, South Atlantic, Indian, North Pacific, and South Pacific. Gyres circle large areas of stationary calm water, and debris drift into these areas due to the lack of movement, creating significant garbage patches in each major gyre. The most significant and well-known garbage patch created is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a collection of marine debris in the North Pacific Ocean, also known as the Pacific Trash Vortex. It is made up of two distinct collections of debris and bounded by the massive North Pacific subtropical gyre. Most of the debris is microplastics that cannot be seen with the human eye. However, it gives the water a sort of cloudy look. In addition, National Geographic oceanographers recently discovered that approximately 70% of marine debris actually sinks to the bottom of the ocean, meaning what we see on the surface is just a fraction of what is actually in the oceans. You may be wondering, well, why can't we just clean it up? The problem is, it is too far away from any country's shoreline that no one will take responsibility, and cleaning it up would bankrupt any country that tried. As the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration of Marine Debris Program has estimated that it would take 67 ships one whole year to clean up less than 1% of the North Pacific Ocean. When discussing plastic pollution in bodies of water, the Great Lakes are very important. The Great Lakes are 21% of the world's freshwater supply, and more than 34 million people rely on the Great Lakes for clean drinking water, which is why it is so crucial that they are protected. However, it is estimated that roughly 10,000 tons of plastics enter the Great Lakes every year, and microplastic concentration in the Great Lakes reaches as high as 1.25 million particles per kilometer squared, which is equal to or greater than what is found in ocean gyres. As the Great Lakes supply both Canada and the United States with crucial drinking water, water quality and quantity issues are shared between the International Joint Commission, which is a binational partnership between Canada and the United States regarding Great Lakes water quality agreements and more. The Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup is a project that Georgian Bay Forever is a collaborator of and has made large strides in the cleanup and education on the plastic pollution problem in the Great Lakes. As shown from the diagram, hosted shoreline cleanups tally their data to send in to show where and how much trash has been collected around the Great Lakes. Plastic left to degrade in our waters also leaches harmful chemicals into the water. Specifically, persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic chemicals or substances. Persistent, meaning it has features that enable it to resist environmental degradation. Bioaccumulative, meaning it can accumulate in living organisms through concentrations in body tissues. And toxic, meaning these chemicals have a variety of toxic properties, resulting in a diverse array of adverse health effects. PBTs are found in plastic products, ranging from the plastic packaging to flame retardant clothing, all of which being littered in our waters. A common PBT is bisphenol A, commonly known as BPA, which is able to seep into food and beverages from containers. BPA affects our endocrine system, which is the system in our body that produces and regulates hormones. As BPA is an endocrine disruptor, it has been found to have a negative effect on both male and female fertility. Plastic pollution in oceans has also led to many problems for animals, one of which being animal entanglement. When animals get entangled in plastic, they can no longer move freely and can choke, starve, or lose limbs. Marine animals can also get entangled in abandoned plastic fishing nets, which is a phenomenon known as ghost fishing. The map to the right shows the extent to which marine animals are being affected by plastic pollution. All dots represent studied animal interactions with plastic taken from peer-reviewed articles. The purple dots being colonization, meaning microbial infestations on animals due to plastic. Red being cases of entanglement. Green being cases of animal ingestion of plastic. And yellow being other cases found. The consumption of plastic is another way littered plastic harms marine life. Hungry animals often mistake plastic fragments for food, which they are unable to digest, causing the plastic to block their digestive tracts. This represses the animal's urge to eat and causes altered feeding behavior and eventually starvation. Plastic ingestion in animals is all too common, as research from the Center for Biological Diversity has indicated that at least half of sea turtles in the world have ingested plastic. Seabirds in particular are studied closely by biologists as they are known as indicator species, meaning they reflect the health of a broad ecosystem due to how far they are constantly traveling. seabirds have shown that entire marine ecosystems are in trouble due to plastic pollution, as it has been estimated by the Center for Biological Diversity that 60% of all seabird species have eaten pieces of plastic, and dead seabirds are often found with stomachs full of plastic, as pictured on the bottom left of the slide. A study completed by the University of Toronto Rockman Lab in 2018 tested sea urchin embryos to see the effects of the chemicals in plastic on their development. The results showed that chemicals in leached water cause various abnormalities, some of which being delayed development, deformed skeletons, and nervous and immune system malfunctions. A similar study completed by the Rockman Lab tested freshwater fish species and how they were affected by microplastics. Exposures to microplastics cause subtle direct effects in prey by consuming the microplastics, and subtle indirect effects in predators who had consumed prey that had microplastics inside of them, meaning that this consumption continues to affect more species in the ecosystem.
One of the biggest issues that comes with an animal's consumption of plastic is the effect of bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Bioaccumulation is the process by which toxins enter the food web by building up in individual organisms over the span of its lifetime. The graphic on the left side of this slide shows a fish as it grows older and accumulates more toxins. Biomagnification is the process by which toxins are passed from one trophic level to the next within a food web, trophic level being different stages of the food chain. For example, small fish feed on zooplankton, placing small fish in a higher trophic level than the zooplankton. Essentially, what happens in this biomagnification scenario, as shown in the graphic on the right side of the slide, is that smaller species are exposed to the low chemical levels in the water or mistake plastic as food and ingest it. At this point, the toxins are at relatively low levels. It starts to become an issue when we think about what happens when larger fish need to eat. At this point, the toxin problem is amplified. As more and more prey are consumed, more toxins get stored in the body of the larger predator, and toxin concentrations increase. One large apex predator that is heavily impacted by bioaccumulation and biomagnification of persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, is the fatty tissues of the orca. Researchers have found extremely high level of PBCs, which are industrial products or chemicals, within the blubber of Arctic orcas, making them the most toxic animal in the Arctic. Additionally, scientists in Japan have found that mother orcas are passing these contaminants to their young through their milk, which has relatively high fat content. PBCs are known to cause problems with reproduction, and studies are currently being conducted to see if and how these organic pollutants are impacting orcas in other ways. All of this to say that the viability of species at higher trophic levels are negatively affected by the ingestion of microplastics at lower trophic levels. The accumulation of toxins in marine animals typically happens as a byproduct of living in an aquatic environment and having chemicals leach out of contaminated plastic into the water where the fish live. A similar process happens with humans. Microplastics may enter the human body through both inhalation from the airborne microplastics in the environment and through ingestion from the diet, from various foods, drinking water, and air, potentially causing detrimental health effects. There is limited data on the mobility of these microplastics through the body. The mobility varies with specific uptake profiles and particle sizes. However, data suggests that only small fractions of administered microplastics are capable of crossing epithelial barriers of lungs and intestines. These epithelial barriers being the single layer of cells that separate the inner environment from the outer environment. The smallest particles, which are less than 0.1 microns or less than 1/1000th of a millimeter, may be capable of crossing the single layer of cells accessing all organs. They are able to cross cell membranes, the placenta, and also the brain. There are associated negative health effects in humans as well. These can present in numerous ways, causing lung and gut injuries, as well as increased blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases in adults. Whether there are dose-dependent effects of microplastics in humans remains relatively unknown. Studies done on rodents out of the National University of Singapore indicate the potential of inhaled or ingested microplastics to cause a variety of biological effects. Observed effects include oxidative stress, cell damage, inflammation, and impairment of energy allocation functions, amongst many others. These effects are usually triggered at high concentrations of microplastics, and this is especially important to keep in mind when you consider the fact that there is an average of 325 microplastic particles present in 1 liter of bottled water. To better visualize what I'm speaking about, there's this graphic. The average person consumes around 70,000 microplastics each year, and this number only increases if you drink water from plastic water bottles, if you get food in takeout containers, if you eat certain types of seafood, or even drink certain types of beer. It is estimated that we consume 1 credit card size amount of plastic each week. In face of the recent IPCC report that Bronwyn went over earlier, the recovery process of the ocean and its stakeholders is still in place, and it's not too late to act. There are emerging opportunities for the global community to protect our ocean and at the same time enhance its potential contribution to sustainable development. In preparation for the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization brought forward 10 proposals for the ocean. They are filled into 4 different objectives. The first objective contains actions to reduce stressors and restore the structure and function of marine ecosystems. The second objective includes actions that support the blue-green economy. This involves identifying opportunities to transform practices of key economic sectors that negatively impact natural systems and the livelihood of people who depend on them, while ensuring the maintenance of biodiversity and its value at the same time. The third supports actions leading to policy, legal, and institutional reform for effective ocean governance. This can involve creating and implementing an institutional and legal framework to protect habitats and biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. The final objective supports marine research, monitoring and evaluation, technology, and capacity transfer as a means for improving knowledge, addressing emerging issues, and developing capacities in support of sustainable use of the ocean. This action plan, now being 7 years old, is a good example of ongoing opportunities for the global community to protect our waters. On a more local note, the Great Lakes span 7,290 kilometers of coastline and account for 21% of the world's freshwater. More than 30 million people rely on the Great Lakes for drinking water. So with Georgian Bay having the longest freshwater beach and the largest freshwater archipelago in the world, Georgian Bay Forever finds it especially important to keep plastic off of our shores and out of our waters. For this, we have multiple projects that work to fight plastic pollution. One of these projects is Divert and Capture. The 3 goals of our Divert and Capture project are to engage the community with hands-on shoreline cleanups. So by hosting weekly shoreline cleanups, we're able to characterize the type of litter we find the most often and create an action plan around that. To provide the public with information on microplastics and practical tips to reduce plastic use, we've created webinars such as this one to educate the public on certain environmental issues that affect those around the bay. And the last goal is to physically divert microplastics from entering our waters at the source. For this, we have a project partner with the Rockman Lab out of the University of Toronto to install microfiber filters on washing machines in the Collingwood community. This project deals with capturing microfiber pollution at the source. The pilot project for Divert and Capture began in August 2019 in Parry Sound, which is a town located on the east shoreline of Georgian Bay and is home to just over 6,000 year-round residents. There, we asked 100 volunteer households connected to town water, meaning the wastewater goes to the water treatment plant rather than a septic system, to install a microfiber filter on their washing machines. They were to use the filters for 2 years during the duration of the study and keep the fibers caught in the filter to be collected and weighed by Georgian Bay Forever to track the amount of fibers we were able to divert. Microfiber filters are being used in Parry Sound and Collingwood to understand the extent of microfiber pollution in Georgian Bay. We have recently finished this pilot project in Parry Sound and are in the midst of a new project in Collingwood with 300 filters to see if the results that we found in Parry Sound hold true. I just want to highlight some of the Parry Sound results right now. A full report and its findings will be published and available to the public shortly. So the image on your left is what the filter looks like. It is connected to the outflow of your washing machine and has a fine mesh bag on the inside of the filter which collects the microfibers. So depending on how many people are in your household and how often you do laundry, it is expected that you would have to clean out the filter every 2 to 6 weeks. The image on your right is the Parry Sound wastewater treatment plant. If you're connected to city water, the water from your washing machine, your shower, your dishwasher, etc., is filtered through a wastewater treatment plant. After the treatment plant, it goes back to its original water source. So for Parry Sound, it would go back into Georgian Bay. For Collingwood, it would also go back into Georgian Bay. Our preliminary results after the first round of collection in Parry Sound found that the filter captured 162 to 371 particles per 5 milligrams of lint. Municipal wastewater treatment plants capture up to 98% of microfibers and plastics, but as discussed earlier, this sludge is often used in the form of fertilizers on fields. A single wastewater treatment plant can release millions of microfibers a day. So for a little perspective, the small town of Parry Sound processes 3 million liters of water per day, which means reducing fibers by just 1 fiber per liter would stop 3 million fibers per day from entering Georgian Bay. We installed 100 filters in people's homes in a community with just over 1,000 homes connected to the municipal wastewater treatment plant, which is approximately 10% of the year-round resident house. Approximately 10% of the year-round households. We expected to see an approximate 10% decrease in microfibers in the wastewater treatment plant effluent. So on the right side of the graph on the left, it shows the amount of fibers per liter before the filters were installed in March and July of 2019. And on the left shows August after they were installed. As you can see, there is a decrease of microfibers in the sample, which is exactly what we were hoping to see. And the microfiber filter that we are using is called the Filtrol 160. There are multiple different brands of microfiber filters that have varying capture rates. The Filtrol 160 is able to capture up to 89% of microfiber shed. The image on the right is what 7 kilograms of microfibers look like after they were collected from the filters in just 4 months. With that being said, we are still looking for about 150 volunteers for our Collingwood study, and we would love for you to be a part of this journey with us. There are 3 simple criteria that must be met. Volunteers must use their washing machines year-round and be connected to Collingwood town water. There must be space for the filter, which is about the same size as a large vertical paper towel roll. And finally, volunteers must participate over the course of 2 years. This will include a short survey about laundry habits and emptying the filter every 2 to 6 weeks into a provided bag, which will be picked up for measurement. If you would like to join us or have any further questions, you can ask them in the question portion of our webinar, or email the project coordinator, Brooke Harrison. Her email is at the bottom of the slide and will also be on the last slide, or you can find it on the Georgian Bay Forever website. Before I move on, I want to talk about the ultimate goal of divergent capture. It is to use the data and research collected to support legislation requiring manufacturers to have microfiber filters built into all washing machines sold in Canada, same as we have on our dryers. This will help stop the pollution at the source, which is the easiest way to eliminate microfibers from ever entering our environment. The aim of the Private Members Bill 279, Environmental Protection Amendment Act, Microplastics Filters for Washing Machines, is to do just that. To support this bill, you can write to your local MPP stating your concerns about water quality and microfiber pollution and its risk to aquatic and human life. More information about what this bill is and how to support it can be found on Georgian Bay Forever's website, or more specifically, follow the link at the bottom of this slide. There are still more macroplastics we are seeing along the shorelines. Shoreline cleanups are something anyone can go and do. Plan one with your household, or maybe a socially distant walk with friends can turn into cleanups. There are also weekly cleanups that GBF organizes and participates in. Last year, we hosted 13 cleanups, which gathered 1,369 pounds of litter picked up by the 112 people who volunteered. At this point in the summer, with only 1 planned shoreline cleanup remaining, we've had 144 volunteers collect almost 2,000 pounds of litter. When we do shoreline cleanups, we record what it is we are seeing. This helps us create a plan for how to reduce this type of litter in the future. So if you do end up planning your own cleanup, please send us your tally sheets, which can be viewed online, so we have a better understanding of what it is we are picking up.
Diversion 2.0 is a project at GBF using 3 trash trapping technologies: gutter bins, sea bins, and trash traps. The 3 goals of the project are to trial the debris capturing technologies, collect data on the amount of pollution and the types of pollution diverted, and educate the public on negative effects of plastic pollution and ways they can reduce their plastic consumption. GBF has partnered with townships, marinas, and Parks Canada around Georgian Bay to install these devices. And the point of these devices is to passively trap plastic that is either making its way into the environment or has already found a home there. Here is a map of our locations for the diversion technologies installed. The sea bins are in blue and gutter bins and trash traps in green. GBF has installed 8 gutter bins in Collingwood, a total of 8 sea bins in various locations around the bay, and are planning to install 2 trash traps as well. You can visit these devices and interact with engaging signage, as well as watch trash get captured in real time. Gutter bins are devices that divert waste from ever entering the water from land. They capture pollution at storm drain openings, on streets and other roadways, and the debris is caught in a mundus bag that is about 3 feet long and can capture debris as small as 600 microns. Depending on the location and volume of traffic, the gutter bins are emptied every 1 to 6 months. And the first gutter bins in Canada were installed in Collingwood by GBF. Littered traps are similar to gutter bins and located at the entrance of storm drains. They have been installed by the Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup, who GBF is a collaborator of, and these collect debris as small as 5 millimeters. Trash traps are attached to the end of stormwater pipes where they collect pollution and organic materials 25 millimeters and larger. And these devices are emptied approximately 3 to 4 times a year and are designed to withstand powerful storm water runoff. Sea bins are big trash bins in the water attached to floating docks that suck in and collect debris and microplastics floating on the water. Sea bins have to be strategically positioned in order for winds and currents to bring the marine litter to their location, and they also move up and down with the natural flow of the water, allowing safe and continual operation in a variety of conditions. In 2019, over 860 sea bins had been installed worldwide, and the combined weight of garbage they have captured is more than 2 million kilograms. Just one sea bin can collect upwards of 3.9 kilograms of debris in a day, filtering as much as 1.4 metric tons of garbage in a single year. GBF performs deep dive waste characterizations on the debris collected from each trash trapping device we have installed, and on certain Great Lakes plastic cleanup devices in Georgian Bay as well. GBF staff and sometimes groups of volunteers search through the collected debris looking for plastics and any other garbage that could have been collected. We have a scientific process created by the U of T trash team for each of our collected debris samples to ensure we are collecting all of the plastic within the vegetation. This process involves rinsing the sample 3 times and using 2 different sieves. We send the collected data to be further analyzed by the U of T trash team at the Hoffman lab. And researching what types of plastics are in the environment is super important for targeting sources and providing information for action plans to stop plastic pollution. During our waste characterizations, we find various pieces of macro and microplastics. One of GBF's most abundant plastics found is floating dock foam, and it was also our most collected item in our shoreline cleanups in 2019. If you look at the top 2 pictures on the slide, you can see pieces of foam we have collected from sea bins during waste characterizations. And from one half-full sea bin in Honey Harbor, we found 26 pieces of foam larger than a toonie and 100 of pieces of foam smaller than a toonie. For many years, unencapsulated blue dock foam was the standard for floating docks, but over the years of the foam being in the water, it starts to break up into smaller pieces, contaminating our waters. And unfortunately, small animals are also great at speeding up this process. So the bottom left picture is taken through a dock and shows a large piece of foam that has now been chewed up or broken up and can float freely in the water, contributing to the plastic pollution problem. So in the fall of 2019, GBF created the Say No to Dock Foam Committee, and the committee worked to inform sellers, consumers, and municipalities about the negative environmental impacts of unencapsulated dock foam. And a report was written about the problems of polystyrene foam and the fate and effects in the Great Lakes. This research and report went towards the passing of Bill 228, which is Keeping Polystyrene Out of Ontario's Lakes and Rivers Act. And this act prohibits unencapsulated, expanded, or extruded dock polystyrene
in floating docks, platforms, and buoys, meaning that if dock foam is still going to be used, it must be fully encapsulated. And this bill was passed in May 2021 and will come into place in May 2023. Yellowfish Road by Trout Unlimited Canada is a great water education program that engages children, families, and communities to reduce water pollution. Participants learn about the impact of plastic pollution and how to protect their local waterways. Storm drains are a huge part of pollution entering our open water, and most storm drains are not redirected to water treatment plants and flow directly unfiltered into waterways. So anything other than water in storm drains causes harmful effects to the environment and humans. So soap, fertilizer, dirt, oil, pet feces, macro and microplastics are all examples of particles that enter our rivers and waterways through storm drains. So if you're interested in participating in Yellowfish Road with GBF, please contact Nicole Diamond. Plastic Free Georgian Bay is a program whose aim is to reduce plastic waste, expand public awareness about plastic pollution, and show how everyone can take action. GBF is looking to create a community of businesses around Georgian Bay that are striving to reduce their plastic consumption and actively create change together. Businesses a part of Plastic Free Georgian Bay can connect with each other and work together to share and create new ways of minimizing their plastic consumption and environmental impact. Some benefits of Plastic Free Georgian Bay are learning practical tips about how your business can reduce its plastic footprint, help reduce the threat of plastic pollution to our environment, and be recognized for the commitment you have made. If you have a business around Georgian Bay, we would love for you to join our campaign. And if not, you can talk to businesses that you visit often and talk to them about joining. And you can email Nicole Diamond to register. And now we have some things that you can do to start your plastic reduction journey or continue to expand it. So first off, you can educate your friends and family. Try to make the environment a key conversation topic as much as possible. Second, be outspoken. Don't be afraid to call people out when they litter, even if it is just a cigarette butt. Just make sure you explain why. Next, talk to businesses and ask them to reduce their plastic consumption. A business is more likely to make changes when they see and hear that more and more customers are looking for more sustainable options while shopping. And lastly, you can write to your local MPP to demand change within your community. On GBF's website, we have outlines of letters to send to your MPP about various environmental issues, so feel free to check those out. Some more important changes to make can be as simple as being a conscious consumer. Really think about the purchases you are making. Is it plastic? Is there a simple alternative? Try and opt for the alternative as much as possible. You can also empower your everyday purchases by supporting and shopping at businesses that are sustainable or are actively trying to reduce their impact. Refuse single-use plastic whenever possible. Try and opt for other alternatives. And you can also check out and follow GBF on Instagram for plastic pollution pointers that we post weekly. Our Instagram is GBay Forever. And of course, you pick up garbage when you see it. If you're out for a walk, you can bring a bag or bucket and some gloves and pick up trash as you go. So as we bring this webinar series to a close, I want to touch on all the changes we have suggested you can make to reduce your plastic consumption and prevent plastic pollution. Reducing plastic consumption and figuring out where to start can be absolutely overwhelming, just like this image. Whether you've been working to reduce your plastic consumption for years or you're just getting started, please don't be discouraged. Make changes when you're able and encourage your friends and family to join you. If you don't know anyone I don't know anyone who is perfectly zero waste or perfectly sustainable. So let's be imperfectly zero waste and imperfectly sustainable together. Let's make changes one at a time together. So thank you so much again for joining us today. An extra big thank you to everyone who has watched all 3 of our webinars in this series. If you missed either of the last 2, you can find them on GBF's YouTube page, which is just Georgian Bay Forever. Please know that your support enables our work. We would also like to acknowledge our funders and partners for these projects. So thank you again, and if there are any questions, please send them using the Q&A feature.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. As Emma just mentioned, if there's any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We do have a few minutes available for that. So go ahead and throw them in there. We did have a question about whether or not you'd be able to preview the webinar after today, and the answer is yes. It'll be on our YouTube as well as in a link in an email that we will send to you at a later date with just a thank you for joining us and watching our webinars. So again, I encourage you just to insert any questions that you might have. We have one question here. So where does plastic come from when we're washing our clothes? Can one of you just touch on where exactly that plastic's coming from?
Yeah, so plastic in clothes is coming specifically from the plastic pollution we're looking at as synthetic fibers. So fibers like polyester and elasticine are just really, really small strands of plastic that get shed normally most of the time during the wash. Up to 700,000 microfibers are shed per load of laundry. And so we try to combat that plastic pollution by installing these microfiber filters.
Great, thanks, Bronwyn. And following up with that, we have a question about where you put the waste that you remove from the washing machine filter.
We recommend that the waste you collect in your washing machine filter, you dispose of the same way that you dispose of your dryer lint filter, because it is the same materials. It should go into ideally the garbage.
Yeah, and I would just add to that if you are part of the Collingwood study, we ask you to save the contents of the filter in a baggie or jar in the freezer for us, because we do collect it to weigh the samples. Another question that one of you could touch on is, are we finding cigarette butts to be an issue in the trash trapping devices?
Yeah, so cigarette butts are actually the most common item picked up in shoreline cleanups, according to the World Wildlife Fund in 2019. We find so many cigarette butts. In our 2 previous shoreline cleanups at Wasaga Beach, we spent 2 hours on the beach with, I think it was around 20 volunteers, and we collected 635 cigarette butts, which is ludicrous. And we find even more collected in the trash collection bins, especially gutter bins, which are right off the street. There's just so many of them. It's a huge, huge issue.
Yeah, thank you. And to add to that, there might not be a ton of knowledge around the fact that the butt of a cigarette does contain plastic in it. So as we've mentioned earlier in this webinar, that plastic is not breaking down and disappearing in the environment. It's just breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. So we absolutely want to prevent microfiber or cigarette butts from entering our environment. And that includes all the not great chemicals that are mixed in with them as well. Another question here is, can you see microfiber pollution in the water?
So microfiber pollution, microplastics in the water, depending on how big they are, they obviously range from up to 5 millimeters, and you can see something that's 5 millimeters if you're looking really, really closely. If you just look at a water source though, you're not going to be able to see that pollution. It's not a really visible pollution, but it is there.
Yeah, and I think we have also collected kind of a sample from our filters before and put it in water, and you can see the microfibers floating around in the water from our washing machine. So it does depend obviously on the size of the microfiber, if you'll be able to see it or not. And obviously with it not being easy to see, that makes it hard for us to clean up. You know, if they're very small, we're not able to see them at shoreline cleanups or see them floating in the lake. And that's why it's so important that we can stop them at the source, because there's just no way that we can clean them up along the shorelines. And then I have another question here that I can answer about what kind of groups are we looking for to participate in Yellowfish Road. So we are looking for it could be school classes, school groups, after school programs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, any types of groups like that, even if there's a neighborhood that's interested in participating and getting kind of their community together to do a Yellowfish Road program, that would be wonderful. We're looking for kind of any groups of people that want to help and educate their children about the effects of things going down the storm drains that's not supposed to go down our storm drains. So if anyone's interested in Yellowfish Road, absolutely please reach out to me. My email is right there on the screen. Yeah, please continue if you have any more questions. Just a question here about if we have reached out to condos or apartments in Collingwood, and if we've talked to town council. I believe that we have reached out to some condos and kind of apartment buildings in Collingwood, depending on who we can get in contact with. We do actively share information with looking for participants to join us through social media, as well as through the news. But word of mouth is also really great. So if you're interested in a filter, or if you know someone who could be interested, please share this information, encourage people to reach out to get a free filter and to join our project. And I believe in the past we have talked to town councils as well when we started it. There's a question here about what strategies do you suggest to get more municipal councils on board? We do deputations to councils pretty regularly to talk about the projects that we are doing and to kind of gauge interest from council. And we do talk to a lot of our municipal partners, just employees that we know and have built relationships with over the years. So we encourage people to reach out to us if they think their municipality could be interested in things, as well as we reach out ourselves. And then there's just a question here too about what is kind of the end all plan for the devices. And I'll just say that these trash trapping devices are wonderful and they are making a difference, and we're seeing what is being collected. But shoreline cleanups and trash trapping devices are never going to be able to clean up all of the pollution, and we're never going to be able to clean up all of the pollution if we don't see serious changes in behavior as well as policy change so that we can eliminate this pollution from entering our land and the waterways at the source. So it's really important that we see that behavior change and policy change, and we need to push for that. Alrighty, I am not seeing any more questions, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up. I just want to thank everyone for joining us again today. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen and learn from our wonderful summer students. Next week is their last week, and we're very sad to see them go. If you want to, of course, watch these webinars, as I've mentioned before, they will be on our YouTube channel. And if any more questions come to you, please feel free to email myself or Brooke. Our emails are on the screen as well as on the website. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to hear from you, and we hope that you learned something today. So take care.